Lisa, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Hi, brilliant, brilliant. I was just thinking, this this might be the first podcast where I pass out. I can't believe how warm it is today.
Oh, I know, I know. Do you know my oldest has just asked me to put the heating on?
Yeah. Oh no, no chance.
He's
And
clearly coming down with something.
I've closed that window beside me because obviously I don't want noise from outside. But I'm thinking, oh my god, I'm going to pass out here. So I've got my water. So MD that's watching and followed us over the last year, this might be the first episode. If you see me going red and starting to slide off the screen, just give me a shout and I should be all right. More to the point, how are you guys?
Yeah, we're good. We're good, thanks. We're sorry I'm a wee bit late coming on. I was trying to get the boys organised there. But yeah, we're good. We're really good, thanks.
Brilliant.
How's things with you? How's your wee boy's teeth?
He's grand. I always say I've got horrible teeth because, well, I do, and I'm trying to sort of play catch up now at this age, but I'm so paranoid about his teeth, so he goes off to the hygienist all the time, and we just make sure we're all right. But no, he's fine. He's fine. So everything's good. Yeah, I just don't. I think if you have got something that sort of went wrong with you along the line, you try and make sure that your wee guy or whoever's, it's not going to happen to them. So hey ho.
I think because the last time we were chatting, he'd said that I think you were giving him Calpol for his teeth.
Right,
that was your big thing. You were terrified about giving him the old Calpol situation.
Do you know? That's probably a good place to start for us tonight, actually, because I went back. Lisa's been on the podcast with us before, and it was a way back in episode 14. I think this is going to be 53 or 54, so that's all right. There, you're back.
I'm back.
So this is going to be episode, I think it's 53 or 54, but I went back and listened to when you were on the last time, and we didn't even have this audio version. It was all the video version. It was all just audio. And what we are going to talk about again tonight with regards to Cole, I was kicking myself the other day because I remember saying to you how worked up I got just if my wee guy got like a temperature for a cold or whatever. So
sorry, I lost you again there. I don't know what happened.
That's all right.
But I think, like we said the last time, when it's your child, it's the end of the world. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. When it's your, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
The joys of having 3 dogs and 2 kids. I have asked Dylan to come and put them in his room, but he's clearly still on YouTube and decided he's not going to bother.
Listen, don't stress, because I keep saying this to people. This is the joy of podcasts. It should just be like this. It should be totally natural. People having a conversation. And if the dogs are barking in the background, listen, it's no stress. It's just life. Right, so let's kick off. And as I say, if you need to step away or whatever, don't worry about it. It's all just nice and relaxed. So let's get an update on Cole first of all, how he's doing just now, and then we'll jump back a wee bit and you can give us a wee recap. As I say, people can go back to episode 14, and that will fill in any gaps that we don't get to today. And I would probably advise anybody who hasn't heard your story so far to go back and listen to episode 14 as well. But how is the wee guy at the moment? What's been happening recently?
He's really good. We had a couple of breakthrough seizures January, February time. They started because the last time I was on, I spoke about the fact that they changed the brand of his phenytoin medicine, which had knocked him off. So that kind of continued, and even though they wouldn't initially change it, they had I'm going to murder the dogs.
That's all right.
I'm allowed to do that live on air. Murder my dogs. It's International Dog Day today. They always supposed to make sure he's on camera. So that kind of plays about, because the change for any child that's on medicine who's got epilepsy, it is really dangerous to change the brand of a medication. And there was a big campaign down in London last year because of that, especially with the Brexit situation.
Yeah.
It took me until January to finally get it agreed to change his medicine back. But by that time, he'd been on it for a good few months. So we had to go through the withdrawal and then the replacement of back onto the Dilantin, which meant that his seizures had a kind of reappearance. Thankfully, they were very mild and they didn't come back as aggressive as they were before his cannabis oil, thank goodness. And by the time that we got him settled on Dilantin, we had to play about with his levels again, just to make sure we got him evened off. So his cannabis has been up. I'd actually spoke to the hospital and said, you know, he's showing signs of seizures. It's one every other day. It's for 10 seconds. It's nothing major, but I'd really like to get his levels checked to see where we're at. And they had said, that's, you know, bring him in, we'll get his levels checked, which they did. And they said, don't touch his cannabis oil. What we want to do is we want to put his phenatone up and we want to keep it up until we see some kind of levels coming up, which I agreed to at the time because, as I said previously, the phenatone works off the liver and so does cannabis. Cannabis purifies your liver, so it makes things work better at a lower dose, which is good for Cole because it means that when he's on phenatone, which is quite a toxic drug, he doesn't need as much of it for it to work because the cannabis is obviously making it work at a lower dose. So he had his levels checked. The levels came back the lowest they'd ever been at 5.5. And they decided to increase his phenatone by 2 mils twice a day, which is a massive jump for Cole. Normally, Cole would go up by half a mil twice a day. So he was going up by 2 mils twice a day, which was big. So I wouldn't have increased his cannabis at that point anyway, just because it was such a quite a big jump. But for 2 weeks, he was stayed on that dose, and he went from having 1 seizure every other day to 2 seizures in a day for the first time since March 2019. So not only was it not working, it was actually making him worse. And when I went and got his levels checked 2 weeks later, they dropped again to 4.4. So to me, that was telling me that the phenatone, his body is rejecting it. It's not working the way it should work. But the hospital, the NHS team can only go on that because as far as they're concerned, Cole's only on 1 medicine because they don't look at the Epidiolex as a medicine. That's his private consultant and the private medical team that deal with that side. So I've now got 2 medical teams dealing with both sides of Cole's medicine, and none of the 2 of them are speaking to each other. The NHS team won't speak to the private consultant. To be fair on the private consultant, you know, she was quite happy to speak to the NHS team, but they don't want anything to do with it. So at that time, all they could continue to say to me was increase the phenatone, because for them, there is no other option. There's nothing else to increase. You know, for them, it's like he's only on 1 medicine, where had he been on 2, which is the kind of standard practice of the NHS, they could have messed about with the other one, especially because he was already showing signs of side effects from the phenatone. And usually, if Cole's showing side effects from any of the drugs he's been on previously, the minute he starts showing side effects, they stop putting that medicine up and they usually go on to the other medicine that he's on and kind of play about with that one and try to see if they can get it leveled out. So this time they couldn't do that. So they put the phenatone up. I'm saying to them, he's getting worse. His anxiety's through the roof. He's got to the stage he didn't even want to leave the house without a blanket over his head because there was flies outside, wasps, Jenny Longlegs, anything. He just petrified. And, you know, when I said to them, his anxiety through the roof, he's showing side effects, he's having headaches, dizziness, you know, we need to look at the alternative, which is the cannabis. They were still saying, no, we're not, you're not giving it enough time. And I'm saying, well, I've given it 2 weeks and he's actually getting worse. Had I put the phenatone up and within, you know, a week, he'd showed signs of either staying the same or getting slightly better, instead of having 1 every other day, was maybe having 1 every 4th day or every 5th day, then I would have thought, right, okay, we're on the right track. But the fact that he got worse over a 2-week period meant to me that he wasn't on the right track. So I said to them, that I was going to put his cannabis oil up that night, which was a Friday night. And since I put his cannabis oil up, there were no more seizures. Literally the next day they were gone. And I sent the NHS team an email basically saying, you know, again, because the last time Cole had seizures was August 11th, 2019, when I messed about and his dad was in hospital on holiday.
Yep.
And I decided to bring it down thinking I knew better. The minute I put it up, his seizure stopped. And I said, you know, I brought it down. He had a breakthrough seizure. I put it back up. We went away. This time, messing about with the brand of his phenytoin, we've had to re-level him, which we've managed.
Mm-hmm.
We've put the phenytoin up. It's made him worse. So now I put the cannabis oil up, and within a day, the seizures are gone and they haven't came back. Surely that's strong enough evidence to show that the cannabis is what's taking his seizures away. But to this day, and that was over a month ago, I haven't had an email back to that email. They are also testing Cole for, they believe he might have a genetic condition, which is too many folds in the brain. I haven't had a meeting with a consultant to find out in detail what the thought process is behind that, or how likely that is that it could have appeared after his brain surgery when he was 2.5. Because my thoughts is, you know, Cole's had brain surgery at 2.5. That part of the brain that was removed would have been examined. Mm-hmm. Had he had this genetic condition, I'm assuming it would have been from birth. Yeah. And if he did, the too many folds in the brain would have been obvious on the tissue that was removed from his brain, because it was the outer part of his brain that was removed. So he had to go for a 3T MRI scan just over a month ago to find out what was causing his epilepsy to regress almost, because he was doing so well. Yep. They wanted to see if there was some kind of genetic condition that would explain that. But we don't have the results back from that either. I actually emailed them asking if there's anything back yet, because I still don't have it. I don't know that. I think that he's got a genetic condition. I think the reason his epilepsy is regressed is because his cannabis oil has helped so much. Yep. But it could be that there is a genetic condition that's came later on after he's 2.5. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. As I say, it was just a test that they wanted to do that I agreed to, because they didn't have to put him under general anaesthetic to do the 3T MRI. Cole was an absolute trooper and just lay there still as you like, on the promise of V-Bucks and the Robux.
Yeah, here you go. That's where half of my salary goes now.
Yeah, so does mine.
See, for anybody that is just listening to this, and again, we've been talking about 5 minutes. It might be worthwhile watching us on YouTube just to see how many times I roll my eyes tonight, because I know that I'm already some of the stuff you tell me just about the arrogance and ignorance. And I want us to jump back in a wee second, and you can sort of give us a wee bit of the backstory. As I say, we went all in in episode 14. I'll just keep saying that to remind everybody, but we will get you to give us a sort of a recap of just how Cole got to where he is just now. But it's, as I say, I get so frustrated that, well, it's over a year since I last spoke to you, and you're still just meeting the same response over and over, or else it seems that way. So let's have a wee recap now, Lisa, if that's okay. Just about you realising that Cole had epilepsy and what you went through at the time, and then up to where you made the decision that you were pretty much going to take things into your own hands. So can you do that for us? Is that okay?
Yeah, Cole was diagnosed, Cole took his first seizure at 3 months old. He was very quickly diagnosed with focal epilepsy, which was caused by damaged tissue in the left side of his brain, which is known as cortical dysplasia. He was at his worst having 20 seizures a day. Majority of Cole's seizures were through the night, so he wasn't getting a good sleep. It caused development delays, but it didn't cause any physical disabilities. And for the first probably kind of 6 years, it was, trial and error. we tried medicine, didn't work. Cole, within a year, they decided that Cole was drug resistant. So we tried brain surgery when he was just 2.5, and we thought that had worked. We got a period of 6 months where he was seizure free. And then unfortunately the seizures came back gradually for the first year after post-surgery, and then for the second year they kind of came back and they were back to the way they had been. After brain surgery, the only option at that point was, again, try more medicine, 3, 4 at a time, taking one away, adding one in, putting it up, putting it down. Nothing really seemed to give him any seizure relief for any length of time. We would maybe get 2-3 weeks at the very most where we would have, less seizures, but they always came back. And then in May 2018, Cole's seizures took a kind of different turn, which meant that when he was taking seizures, it started affecting his speech and his walking. Initially, it was very mild and you couldn't really notice it. But by October 2018, Cole was suffering a thing called toy paralysis, which was every seizure he had, it was the straight after the seizure was almost like he'd had a stroke. And initially it would be kind of 10 to 20 minutes where he would be paralysed and unable to speak. And then it would come back gradually, maybe over an hour, until eventually by kind of end of November, Cole had toy paralysis that was affecting him for almost a full day. So Cole had went from being a 6-year-old boy that could ride a 2-wheeler bike without stabilisers, full of life, full of nonsense, to a wee boy that couldn't even hold his own head up. And, initially I tried campaigning to the government for the kind of unlicensed but pharmaceutical grade CBD product called Epidiolex.
Yep.
But by the time that I was granted one of only 5 prescriptions in Scotland for Cole, it was kind of too late for them, and good for me in a way, because I then knew exactly what I was looking for, and it wasn't a CBD isolate, it was a whole plant, full extract, including the THC. As I've said before, I was a police officer for 10 years, so I was quite negative towards cannabis, and it was only through researching cannabis to prove myself right that I found out how wrong I was, and that actually I had complete tunnel vision for a plant that that has given us our absolute miracle, which a lot of people tell me never to say the word medical, but it's your miracle. Initially when I'd first gotten a Cole plant, it was legal, from a clinic in Barcelona called the Calapa Clinic. They pointed me in the right direction, and we managed to stop his toy paralysis, but he was still having seizures. They reduced slightly, but he was still having seizures. So I knew I was on the right track. But for me, because I'd done so much research and I'd spoke to other parents who were also using cannabis oils, whole plant oils for their children, I knew that the reason it wasn't having the desired effect was because the THC was just slightly too low. Okay. At that point, I think the THC level was 0.2%. I think our legal limit 0.3%, so it was just under the legal limit. Okay. And the cannabis oil that I use for Cole at the moment it's a 9-to-1 ratio, but it's 0.5% THC, right. So it's minimally over the legal limit. However, it's only legal if you have a prescription. So I had him on the CBD, my CBD 10%. Initially, it went really well, and then I got the phone call offering me Epidiolex, and it was one of those ones where my gut was screaming at me to say, this isn't going to work, Lisa, don't even think about it. But I think with, it wasn't just my decision. Cole's dad's very active, and my family are very active in Cole's life. So we all had a discussion, and it was agreed that we would try it, because at the end of the day, what could go wrong? If nothing else, it was a box that we ticked to say we tried what they were offering, it wasn't going to work, and now we wanted what the other kids have, which was Vegemite. We took him off the My CBD. The kind of plan was to take him off it, wean him off it for 2 weeks, and then start the Epidiolex. but the Epidiolex was delayed, so it meant that Cole had it out of his system for almost a month. And so by the time that we went to collect his Epidiolex from the hospital, Cole took the biggest seizure he ever had and collapsed in the opening of the lift in the sick kids hospital. Thankfully, 2 nurses were there at the car park and they helped me, and we got him into the hospital. And we got a wheelchair getting back out to the car, started the Epidiolex, had really high hopes. In my experience with other kids that had used it, I thought we would get probably about 4, 5, 6 months relief from Epidiolex, and then it would stop working. That's what kind of other kids had found.
Yep.
But unfortunately for Cole, it didn't work at all. Actually, it was probably the worst he's ever been in his whole life. And he started taking it beginning of February or middle of February. And his dad works offshore. He does 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. And so he just left Cole. And when he'd left him, he was on his bike. They had been away for the weekend, clay pigeon shooting, hot tubs, BMX biking, you know, quite kind of activity break. And his dad had been offshore for 3 weeks. And by the time his dad came back, Cole was completely paralysed, couldn't even hold his own head up, was drooling. We were actually waiting on an assessment from speech and language to see if he was still able to swallow. And he couldn't speak anymore. And David was, you know, he was in absolute shock. He was like, what the hell is going on here? Like, how have you allowed this to happen? Like, why are the hospital not doing anything about this? And I kept saying, you know, they kept saying another week, increase it. And you kind of go along with it, thinking that maybe it will work. But as he got to the stage where it got so bad that he was actually rushed into hospital in March, unresponsive, that's when, you know, the decision was made that enough was enough. I had already got access to Cole's medical records. The plan was already kind of in place. It was just when was the right time to go. And my plan was to fly over to Holland, go to The Hague, which is where the Transvaal is, that makes Epidiolex oil, find a doctor over there that was willing to prescribe for Cole. And after 4 days of walking and seeing 3 different doctors, I finally got a doctor that would prescribe, because the first couple of doctors wouldn't see us. They were, you know, they were too busy. They can't, you walk into the doctor's surgery over there, and the doctor's receptionist is like, "Can I help you?" And it's like, "Yeah, I'm from Scotland. I'm looking to speak to a doctor about," and you're kind of like, "Cannabis medicine," and she's like, "Sorry, you know, already there's a accent barrier, because it wasn't a language barrier, it was just the accent."
Yeah.
And I was like, cannabis medicine, as if it was a dirty word, you know. And she's like, "Oh, cannabis, you know, cannabis is at the top of her voice." I'm like, "All these people are here, shh, don't tell anyone," you know, as if it was this terrible thing, because we're so used to the stigma here. Anyway, we got to see a doctor. I told him Cole's full kind of scenario, all the drugs. I had a list of all the medications they'd previously tried. In fact, I had brain surgery. I had every part of his scans and everything on disc. And the doctor was actually really shocked that they hadn't offered it to me already. He couldn't believe it, that, you know, brain surgery was the only option for Cole. So they agreed to prescribe Epidiolex. And when I came back, because Cole was in the hospital, it was very much like, what do? We need to get him off Epidiolex first. We can't just introduce this drug. Plus, he's in the hospital, so they kind of need to know what's going on. As much as it was a risk telling them, it was a risk that had to get taken, because, you know, the first thing is Cole's safety at all times. And I just wanted to make sure they weren't going to do anything, give Cole any like loading doses, which they ended up they did without me knowing. And even at that point, the consultant said to me with his head in his hands, he's known Cole since he was 3 months old, and said, "Keys, I don't know. I've never seen anything like it. He's deteriorated so quickly. And we've tried, they've done lumbar puncture, they've done MRIs, they've done CT scans, they've done extensive bloods, extensive urine, and nothing was coming up. And all their answer was, this is just his epilepsy. You know, this is it now." And the only thing that they could offer me was to either try the medicines that we'd already tried and go back over them, which didn't work first time round, and we didn't have time for that, or brain surgery. And the second brain surgery would mean that they would disconnect the left from the right side of his brain, which would leave my 6-year-old son, who was riding a bike and, you know, living as best a quality of life as he could, paralysed down one side and partially sighted. And, you know, there was no way back from that. Once that disconnection surgery is done, that's it for Cole, you know. So I still tried to fight my case, you know, surely it's better trying this plant. You know, I even agreed that I would get a lawyer's letter, that I would take full responsibility if anything went wrong, that, you know, it wasn't on their head, it was on mine, and they still wouldn't do it. So eventually, when there was no option, they said, you know, what do you want to do? And I said, to be honest, I want to get back on whole plant. At this point, I believe now that they thought when I said whole plant, I was talking about the legal one from Spain. Because obviously they didn't know that I'd been to Holland, nobody knew. So when I've said whole plant to them, they've kind of said, well, look, we can't support your decision, but if that's what you want to do, that's what you do. And I was like, well, I just need you to know that that's what I'm going to do. It might have been a different conversation had they thought I was going to use Epidiolex, which was illegal at this point, because even though a doctor in Holland had prescribed it, legally, I couldn't have brought it back into the. Even now, if I've got a prescription for Epidiolex, I can't go to Holland, buy it and bring it back. I have to get an importer to do that for me. So, you know, there's all sorts of kind of rules and regulations around it. But thank goodness that conversation took place, and, you know, we started him on it towards the end of March, and by the 11th of April, I'm sure it is, I've got a video of Cole running into school.
See when we got to this part of the story on the last episode, when I was listening back, I listened to the full episode the other day there, and I thought to myself, there's something else I want to explore here, or I want to explore with you just a wee bit sort of deeper. And I was new to doing podcasts and stuff at the time, and it was like, kind of know, there was questions that I didn't ask. And I'll tell you what the question is. You're at that stage where, like, literally your 6-year-old boy's life, and it sounds dramatic, but it's the truth, was in the balance. How does a mum feel? What was it like during the day? You try to sleep at night. That we made a joke about me worrying about a silly cold and a temperature in my wee boy. I want to, if you'll allow us, just to explore what you as a mother, how you were over that stage. I don't even know where you would start to deal with that. So, because you obviously got to that point where you said, no, look, we're trying this. This is what we need to try. But where were you where were you emotionally or mentally just before you got to that sort of point?
I was numb. You're running on adrenaline, because really, as a parent, when things get so dark and scary, you don't matter. Everything that you are and every bit of energy that you've got has to go in to them. So it had to go into Cole, and I've got 2 wee boys. I've got an 11-year-old as well, Cole's brother, who needed me. You know, in between their dad and I, we were taking shifts at the hospital, and then trying to put a happy face on it to keep Dylan from being scared of what his brother was going through. Dylan had witnessed his brother going, you know, downhill so rapidly, and he didn't understand either. I mean, as adults, we didn't understand. As medical professionals, the hospital didn't understand. So what chance is a wee boy 8, almost 9 got? So for me, I actually don't know. It was after I got Cole better that I got quite sick. That's when my mental health took a dip, because it was afterwards. I don't sleep great anyway. I'm the lightest sleeper in the world, so a pin drops and I'm awake. But because I had never really had a sleep since I had Cole, because Cole slept in my bed every night, and every night, every time he took a seizure, I was awake with him. holding him until he came out it and making sure when he came out it, he was okay. And then I would lie awake for a wee while until my adrenaline would calm down. I would go back to sleep for however long it took to the next one kicked in. And that was my life. So when we were going through this, I was used to not sleeping, but instead of me not sleeping, waiting for the next seizure, I wasn't sleeping, researching and reading and researching and reading and messaging people and emailing politicians and emailing NHS chief execs and, you know, hospitals in different countries in the world, looking if there's anywhere and anything that I can do to make this easier for Cole. But, you know, my boys, dad and I separated when Cole was only 1. He works offshore. I've got a job. I work for Unison for NHS Lothian. Both boys had school here. You know, it wasn't something that we could just up sticks and go and stay in Holland and kind of ride it out. It just wouldn't have worked. I would have been on my own. But had I needed to have done that, that's what I would have done, because that's just what would have happened. So you don't really get to feel anything. It's afterwards when you start to think, I can't go through that again. There's absolutely no way that I can go through that again. I'm not strong enough. So this needs to work. That's when I got for me, my mental health took a real dip, and I was an emotional wreck. And I spoke to his dad briefly after it, and David's such a guy and doesn't really do emotion, doesn't really talk about his feelings, you know. But he did say to me, I feel the worse now than I did when we were going through it, Lisa. And I said, I'm the same. And I think it was because we were no longer running on adrenaline. You know, we had our boy back. We were doing everything that we could to get him better. And all of a sudden, the emotions and everything that we would have been feeling through that period of time just hit me like a ton of bricks. And, you know, David was the same. So, yeah, I think it was afterwards that the emotion hit us. At the time, you don't really have time to even think about yourself.
This is why I think what's now getting called long form podcasting and long form conversations are brilliant, because like even I get defensive because I know, and we talked about this previously, like people just see headlines in newspapers and you still get it, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but like, or imagine her giving her son these drugs and her, do you know, and it's important that you get a chance. And I know you know that this isn't about you. I know that, but it's important that people get the full picture here to realise what you and your full family have went through. And that's the absurd part, what you've went through just to make your wee boy better. I mean, sure, this is a bit, I remember, I've done this in the last podcast as well, get myself all wound up about this, but how this is even an issue that these kids, and you're just about to tell this part of the story, which is great, how these kids can just turn around because of something that grows out the ground. It's the most natural thing in the world. It's a plant in its most natural form, yet we're still nowhere near where we should be. So, but anyway, completely brave mum makes the decision. So tell us what happened there then. Like how did you obviously got it in here to the country, and then how was it started to administer to Cole, and then it was very quickly that it started turning him around, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a kind of false start because we started giving him it in the hospital, and then the hospital decided that they wanted to start him on a drug, phenytoin, and phenytoin is like one of the kind of last drugs they would usually try because it's quite a toxic drug, quite an old drug as well, and you know, you've got to keep checking the liver function, and if it's too low it can cause seizures, if it's too high it can cause seizures. It's really quite a particular drug, and it has serious side effects, rare forms of cancer, liver disease, gum disease, heart disease, I mean nervous system disorders, high anxiety, depression, oversensitivity to to emotions. I mean, you name it. There's a list for this medicine. However, at that point, obviously, as parents, we're like, we just want them better.
Yeah.
What the side effects were at that point, it was kind of almost like, we'll deal with that later. Let's just get better first. So the first night we gave him the cannabis oil, his seizures had halved, and we knew we're on the right track. Unfortunately, they then wanted to give him a loading dose of phenytoin, so we had to stop it for 48 hours.
Yeah.
And then after the 48 hours, we put him back on it. And again, he continued to get better and improve. They actually were supposed to keep him in hospital an extra week. And at the weekend, they were short of beds. So they'd said, look, he's looking great. Why don't you take him home for the weekend? He'll get to see his brother. So David had went back to work and I was on my own. So I was delighted because I thought, I can go home and spend the weekend with Dylan as well.
Yep.
We came home and he just was so amazing. He just get real, like he was eating proper foods. He was starting to try and stand up on his own. And then I took him back into the hospital on the Monday to kind of almost check back in.
Yep.
And his consultant was on holiday at the time. So it was another consultant that we'd seen, and he had obviously been reading Cole's records about how terrible he was.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went into it was actually in the family room, we met the consultant because the other rooms were busy. I wheeled him in and he was in his wheelchair, and I'd unclipped his wheelchair and I was letting him kind of stand up and I was holding his hands. And the consultant came in and sat down and said, I'm not really sure this is the same boy that I've got here on these notes. And I said, oh, it definitely isn't. The boy that was here last week is nothing like the boy that's here today. And Cole's trying to show off, as he always does, trying to stand up, trying to walk between the chairs. And I was like holding him because he kept losing his balance, but he was determined. And he said, he's like, I don't think that you need to stay here this week. I think you could continue his treatment at home. I've scheduled intense physiotherapy, intense occupational therapy, intense speech and language, and I can't remember what the other one was. There was quite a few for the week. It'll be 3 times a week from now and for the next 6 months.
Okay.
And we'll see where we go. We got home, and by 3.5 weeks later, he was signed off from everyone.
Yep.
No one needed to see him anymore. And even the people that were seeing him didn't really have to see him after probably week 1 or week 2. They were just kind of like, we'll just hang about just in case, He even got better than he was originally because Cole's always had a weakness in his right side because it's his left side of the brain that's damaged.
Yep.
And that was completely gone.
Yep.
His physiotherapist couldn't believe it. She's like, even the weakness in his leg is gone. There is no weakness there now. Yep. So we just get better and better. And by the 11th of April, he was running into school. He was back on his bike a week later. Yep. Obviously, everything that I'm saying is documented on my Facebook and public posts and on Cole's own Facebook page, because I took videos every day to the extent now the boys are 9 and 11 and they still, every time they're doing something, they go, oh, you want to video me? You want to video it? Because they're so used to me videoing them. It was a miracle. I mean, there is no other word that I can use. I had been in a hospital with my child who, I think I said this previously, that Cole was born with a disability. He was born in his class as having brain damage because part of his brain is damaged.
Yep.
When I think of a child that's got brain damage, I don't think of Cole.
Yeah.
And Cole had never shown any, if you've met Cole out, he was one of these kids that if he acted up after a seizure, it was almost embarrassing because people round about thought he was just a badly behaved child because he showed absolutely no form of his disability. He is such a kind of happy, positive wee guy, and majority of his seizures were through the night, so nobody really got to see them except close family and me and his dad. So from that to go to, having to go to, we went to my friend's wee boy's christening, and it was in East Kilbride, and there actually wasn't a ramp for a wheelchair. Okay. And I got his wheelchair out. I was really quite anxious because I thought we're going to walk in here and everybody's going to look at us, not because they're staring because they're going to go, oh my goodness, like they've known Cole since he was wee, and all of a sudden nobody'd seen him for a couple of weeks, and boom, he's in a wheelchair. And two of my friends, guys, were out having a cigarette, and they came and helped me lift the wheelchair in. And then when I went in, everybody was just absolutely gobsmacked at the difference in him. Cole, true to himself, still wanted to get up and dance out his wheelchair. And, so I had such a long time of coming to terms with Cole's disability being invisible, to then having a visible disability, and a wee boy that then became a poor wee soul that I couldn't communicate with because we didn't understand. I didn't understand anything he was trying to say. I remember in the hospital, I didn't ever cry in front of Cole. I'm quite bad for that. I don't really cry in front of my kids. And I went to the bathroom to kind of pull myself together because I could feel myself. And I remember sitting in the toilet, and I'm not religious. I don't pray to God. For me, I'm all about the angels and energy and all that kind of stuff. But I remember sitting in the toilet and thinking, please God, if you can give him anything back, please let him be able to speak to me. I just want to hear his voice. I just want to be able to understand him. And I want to, I just wanted to hear him laugh again. It was just awful. It was probably one of my darkest days of that time. To then,
Christ, so you're going to set off here. Carry on, sorry.
For to flip a switch and a couple of weeks later to watch him riding his bike, and all I can moan about is the fact that his dad had forgot to put his helmet on him when he was cycling to school. Just such a protective mother thing to do. But yeah, it was just it happened so quickly. Him deteriorating, and then obviously thanks to the miracle plant, it happened so quickly, and we got him back. So yeah, it was. It's been a hell of a journey.
Where are we with the law now? So what's so a couple of things with the law, and then obviously we can tell with your facial expression there. This isn't going to be good news, but the law and where you're positioned with the National Health Service as well, and like how are you still accessing the cannabis oil, and just the logistics of that? How's that working? Like what's legal, what's not legal, what's the NHS's stance, etc., etc. We've not even got to it yet, and whether that's caused you any hassles or.
It did, but we sorted it. Brexit sorted. That's one of the boxes we've ticked.
Right. Okay.
So legally, as it stands, cannabis medicines are legal to prescribe, including THC, and I'm talking as high THC as you like. It is completely legal as long as it's prescribed by a doctor on the special register. Okay. There's a special register in Scotland, and there's over 750,000 medical professionals on that register in the UK that can prescribe tomorrow if they see fit.
Okay.
Not one of them is willing to prescribe. And the government and the NHS don't see anything wrong with that. They don't see that that's a system that's broken. They see that as well. If they wanted to prescribe, they would prescribe. And when you spoke earlier about people giving me a bit of flack, that's one of the biggest things I get is listen to your medical professionals. They know best. And I completely disagree, because for me, I think the person that knows best is the mum, dad, parent, whoever it is that's the parent in their life, whether it's granny, granda, aunt, uncle, mum, dad, whoever it is that's looking after that child. They know them better than anyone. I know Cole better than anyone else, and that's because I live and breathe him, and he's mine. I know when he's in pain before he even opens his mouth. You're not going to get that in a university. I don't care what anybody says, right? So also, I did listen to the medical professionals, and they didn't give me anything else to go on. There wasn't a good option. It was, your son's either going to die, or you're going to let us cut his brain in half and leave him in a wheelchair. And the fact that I chose an alternative route and got him better doesn't mean that I don't respect the medical professionals. It means that I decided that there was another option, and I went for it. That's all there is. And your gut tells you. So the law has been changed in November 2018 for what it was changed for is, CBD was always able to be prescribed and it was always legal.
Yeah.
The law change was to add THC into the mix because that wasn't legal. Since the law got changed, no one has been prescribed on the NHS cannabis-based medicine that includes THC. We've had Epidiolex, which is a CBD isolate, but that was able to be prescribed prior to the law being changed. So that's not anything that the law change has done.
Yeah.
So the law still stands exactly the same. If anything, the change in law actually hindered the process because prior to the law being changed, 2 people has and still have an NHS prescription for Epidiolex, the oil that Cole's currently taking privately.
Yep.
And that was because before the law got changed, there was a panel in place and you could go on a case-by-case basis and go in front of the panel to show evidence, and they would decide whether they believed that your child should have a prescription for Epidiolex. And that's where Alfie Dingley got his prescription. Sophia Gibson's parents got her prescription in Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, they had to move to Holland, and then Sophia got taken off it after doing so well. To come back here, they took her off it and she went into a coma, and they fought and got it back. And thankfully, she's the other one that's got an NHS prescription. And I'm still really close with Sophia's parents, and she's doing amazing. In fact, they put a lovely post up the other day, how she went for a yearly check and the hospital can't believe how amazing she's doing and how it's been I think it's over 18 months and she's had any emergency hospital admissions, which for Danielle and Darren must be incredible, because I'm talking they were getting rushed in an ambulance every other day. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have that with Cole, thank goodness. So I can only imagine.
So this, I hate calling it a drug as well, but we'll call it a drug at the moment. No, we won't. We won't. This oil, this plant is legal. So
yes,
cannabis oil.
Only if you have it prescribed by a medical professional on the list.
Right, and that's
or if you have it prescribed by a private consultant. So it's all right. It's legal if you get it prescribed by a private consultant and pay for it.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to prescribe it if you want it through the NHS for free, because they don't agree with it through the NHS, even though it's probably the same consultants that work NHS and privately.
Yeah.
But
so do you ever get MD that, or have you ever had MD say to you, sort of on the quiet, like within the medical community I'm talking about? Obviously, you've got all of this support for your local community, but these professionals, has MD ever said to you, like, I can't really say this, but I think you've done the right thing, or whatever? Or is it just always a case of, no, cannabis is wrong, doesn't matter, all these positive results, we still can't say to you that it's right?
No, there's no one that no one in the medical group of people that are around Cole. I know medical professionals personally who know Cole. My sister's a nurse, and they're just like, it's a no-brainer. I'm not really sure what the block is here. Yeah. There's also there's people who will actually argue. They'll not just say no. They still argue with me to say, this is 100% not cannabis that's doing this. This is phenatone, the most toxic drug pretty much you can get for kids, but it's the phenatone that got him out of a wheelchair and put him back on his feet within 3 weeks. That was not cannabis. It's not even that they're saying we're no sure. It's that they're saying it's absolutely not cannabis that's doing this. Even though I always say to people, see if this was a one-off and it was just Cole, I could maybe understand people not believing it. But there's 60 kids over the UK that are actively campaigning at the moment, and their families, to have access to not just cannabis oil. The majority of them are on Epidiolex, the same oil as Cole. Yeah. And I don't know of any other of the 60 kids that I'm talking about that take phenytoin that have had exactly the same results. They've had either major seizure reduction. I'm talking kids that were having 200 seizures a day, to maybe 5 a day, or kids that are actually seizure free. All of them are taking Vegelite or some form of cannabis oil with a THC. And I don't know any of them that are on phenytoin. The majority of the parents have got the kids off all the other pharmaceutical drugs and they are only taking cannabis medicine.
Yep.
But these are kids that were the same idea as Colt. They all have different forms of epilepsy, all different ages, boys, girls, but every one of them has a uncontrollable epilepsy. So very rare forms of epilepsy that is almost impossible to control, that are now controlled. So, you know, if you look at Cole as an individual, you can see why people would maybe go, that's a bit mental, like, surely no. If that was the case, that would be available in the NHS. If that was the case, if what that lassie's saying is true, we would all have it, right? But when you look at the fact that there isn't just Cole, there's all these kids across the UK, and if you Google, you know, kids taking cannabis or cannabis available for children with epilepsy in the NHS, a million stories will come up and they'll all be very similar to Cole's.
Yep.
And they're all very positive.
Yep. So how did see when you mentioned I'm certain you did, I might be putting words in your mouth here, but the video's there, but I'm sure that you mentioned Brexit at the beginning, and the reason why I'm making a fuss or a point over that is because it when I was making some notes today, because of the crazy year and a half that we've all had, Brexit had just completely went out of my head. So I was only going to ask you about COVID and lockdowns and how you guys had been during all of this madness, but I'll chuck the hand grenade that's Brexit into that as well, because all of this must have been, if your story isn't crazy enough as it is, you've then got to deal with all of this when the world shut down, or we're now no trading as we were with all these countries where you're getting the medicine for a start. How's the last year and a half been?
I mean, the majority of lockdown and stuff on a personal level for me and the boys was great because they still got to see their dad. I got loads done in the house. I got to spend amazing time with my boys. My work were phenomenal. Literally before we went into lockdown, because I worked from the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh and we had quite a lot of COVID cases in there, my boss said to me, go home, be with your kids. That's your priority, you know. So I was sent home a couple of weeks before lockdown, and you know, all they cared about was making sure that my boys were safe, because Dylan was born with one kidney as well. So, you know, she just wanted to make sure that me and the boys were fine. So we had no concern. I was one of the fortunate ones that kept my job, kept my salary, and we were safe. With regards to how it affected us on campaign level, it was a nightmare because we had all these fundraisers organised that had to be cancelled at the last minute. There was then no way of fundraising. We had to think out the box of ways to fundraise that we could do through the lockdown, try to keep our head above water. There was a couple of months that, you know, David and I had to dip into our own money and start like reining in and making sure we had money there to pay for it every month, because there wasn't a big pot of money anywhere. I contacted the government and NHS to ask for emergency funding because of this extreme circumstances. I was told no. And then with Brexit, what happened with Brexit is, because Coles Oil comes from Holland, when the Brexit situation hit, I was given a phone call from the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer, Alison Straff, who, by the way, is phenomenal. Out of everybody that I've had to deal with, and it'll be 3 years on the 14th of October that I've been campaigning, she is by far the best that I've ever had to deal with, because she is on the ball. She genuinely cares. If I email her, she emails me straight back. Even if I'm being a bit of a maniac, she's straight on the email, calming me down. And she emailed me that a week or so just before Christmas, to tell me that they just found out that the Brexit deal with Holland won't be going ahead, and as for the 31st of December, there was no way of getting Coles oil,
Yeah.
that they wouldn't honour the prescription from the UK. Thankfully, that all gets sorted, and the UK government put a plan in place to sort that right up until January 2022.
Right.
But I believe that that's now going to be sorted with the Dutch government and the UK government, and obviously the Scottish government are very much involved. So I don't have any concerns over that now. And the other problem was, what was the other problem?
Not enough to be getting on with now.
Believe me, there was so much.
Yep.
You asked earlier about the situation with the government and the NHS, and
Yes.
I'll give you an exclusive because I haven't told anyone yet, only
Perfect,
because
let's go.
it hit me. It hit me when I was away at the weekend with my friends, and I thought, you know, I can't even deal with this right now. So I got an email from, and I don't want to get our position wrong, I think it was Clinical Director or Chief Exec of Glasgow, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. Monica Lennon had wrote a letter a couple of months ago asking them for funding to be put in place, basically saying, you know, this was an emergency situation. It's unfair that I'm being put under the amount of stress that I'm to try and find this money every month.
Yeah.
And until such times as they catch up, where they put money in place. So she tried the government, that wasn't happening. I tried the government, that wasn't happening. So she tried NHS Glasgow, because NHS actually have a charity arm where if a relative dies and they're looked after in, say, Ward 4, that family might want to leave some money, so they leave money. And the money that's not ring fenced for things like equipment or iPads, you know, the money that's not ring fenced goes into a pot. And that pot is supposed to be used for people who are using something or medicine that's not available in the NHS. The loophole that I've got is that it is available in the NHS, they just won't prescribe it for me. So that's why they're saying, well, we can't give you money for it because it is available. It's not our fault that nobody will prescribe it. But the reply that Monica got, she forwarded on to me. And after almost 3 years of high profile campaigning and speaking to everybody in the NHS, I got a reply back addressed to Ms. Cole. And all the way through the letter, that, you know, this chief exec had referred to me as Ms. Cole. And they even spoke about Cole Thompson in the letter, but for me it was Ms. Cole the whole way through. And I thought, it seems like such a daft wee thing to pick up on, right? But see, when you're at that level, to have absolute utter disregard for me,
that's what
they can't even be bothered to get my name right. It was just, I just thought that kind of sums up how I've been treated for 3 years. It's they don't, you know, they don't see me as a human being or as a parent or somebody that's, you know, fought with every inch of me for the last 3 years. It's just annoyance almost. It's like they couldn't even be bothered. Now, I don't believe that letter hasn't even been checked by a couple of people, because when you're at that level of the NHS, you've got someone that types letters for you and then you sign them and then somebody posts them. You know, nobody's even bothered to check that. I know if it was me working in an office and my name popped up, knowing how gobby I am on social media, I'd have triple checked that letter over and over again, but clearly they couldn't be bothered. So that kind of sums up where I'm at with the NHS. The government, I'm no further forward with the government either. As I say, Alison Strath's been amazing, and she sorted out, it was her that helped me sort out Cole getting back on his Delanton. It was also her that sorted out the Brexit situation really quickly. And I believe that if there's anything going on in the background, that she's on it, because she's been tremendous. I'm hoping that that's the case. I'm hoping that it's went quiet because there's something going on in the background that I just don't know about yet. But we'll see.
So I know that the figure, I know what the figure is, because you were talking about it on your social media, but just for the podcast, like, what were you guys having to find every month through the fundraising, and that's going up now as well, I believe.
We were up at like 1,200, I think, or 1,400, and then we got a discount. Target, who are the importers for Coles medicine and all the other kids, went to Transvaal and Bedrican and basically said, you know, like through this lockdown, can we get a discount? So it kind of dropped down to 900. But with Cole increasing his dose, getting bigger and stronger, his dose has jumped back up again. So we're now at, it's £1,140 every 28 days. Because a private prescription can only run for 28 days, so it's not even a full month.
Okay.
So it's £1,140 every 28 days at the moment. And you know, that I think will be for the foreseeable, because I've just increased it and got an extra bottle. So I think that'll probably do him for any more than 1 or 2 increases,
Okay.
which should be a wee while, because you don't need to increase it that much. He's not growing that quickly.
Right.
Thankfully, even though he's a wee skinny mini, I'd like him to put a wee bit of beef on, but
yeah,
it's difficult when you know that the minute he grows, which you want to see, to put that dose up means another nearly £200 every time that dose goes up. You know, you think, oh, here we go. That means it's another wad of cash added on. So it was £900 every month, and we had like a kind of amount in the bank that was going to last us. But then obviously, because it jumped up by nearly another 300 quid, then it's not lasted just quite as long. So I started fundraising again the other day, just because there's no movement in the government, there's no movement for the NHS. After I got that letter from NHS Glasgow, basically couldn't even get my name right. I thought, well, there's no chance of them funding my kids' medicine. So I thought I'll just have to get the begging bowl out again. And I was dead honest. I'm tired. You know, I get quite a lot of people saying to me, oh, I'll do an event for you, or we'll give you our hotel or our pub or a restaurant to do an event. But the hardest part of an event is putting bums in seats. So, you know, that's the bit that drains me, because I have to go to the same people that I've been going to for 3 years and asking them to still support us. And everybody's been phenomenal, and the support that Cole's had has been incredible. But everybody's got their own stuff going on, you know, and in 3 years, people have lost their job. COVID's hit major businesses, people, there's folk that are losing people to cancer, dementia, you know, they've got their own charities, their own causes that are close to their own heart that they want to raise money for, or they want to donate to. They don't want to have to be funding Cole. And that's just the way of the world, whether it sounds harsh or not, it's true. It's 3 years down the line, and I'm so grateful that we've still got the support we have. It's just, it's kind of drying up a bit now. There's a girl who is on my Facebook, Lindsay, and she's lovely. I've never even met her, and she's massive on TikTok. She's a big TikTok person, and she's trying to train me on how to do TikTok videos and stuff. So I mean, when I say TikTok videos, I'm not doing all that crazy dancing. It's literally just posting videos of Cole to share his story. But yeah, that's kind of opened up a new world for the fundraising side, to hope that the people on TikTok take Cole into their heart and help us fundraise a wee bit. So yeah, it's trying to think out the box now of different ones, because the days of hiring a hall and creating an event and selling tickets are kind of not there at the moment. People are still scared. The COVID cases are rising again. People are a bit terrified. I don't want to put anyone in that position. I know from my point of view, I'm kind of living as normal a life as I can within the rules, but not everybody wants to even come out anymore. They're scared. So I wouldn't want to put that on anyone to, come out and raise money for Cole if they're not comfortable. So we're trying to do as much as we can online.
It's just one of those things, isn't it, about that we don't realise that the lockdown or the pandemic, like you've got COVID that everybody has to deal with, but then someone in your position, just that other layer of problem that it adds. There's going to be so many fallouts for this in so many different areas. We'll give all the social media and the GoFundMe and stuff a shout out just in a wee second before we wrap it up. But how far into the future do you look? How does that look to you on like good days or the best days? Or are you hopeful that this will? You must lose faith sometimes, but how hopeful are you that this will be like antibiotics one day, or it'll be like asthma inhalers or heart medicine that, do you know, you go to the doctor
I've got absolutely no doubt that, you know, I don't know how long it will take, but at one point we will look back and think, I can't believe I went through all of that to get cannabis, because it will be probably in supermarkets at that point, you know.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, look at the CBD market at the moment. 5 years ago, if you went into a shop and there was CBD, you'd have thought you were in Amsterdam.
Yep.
You know, and now it's everywhere.
Yep.
All these celebrities are promoting it. It's everywhere. So I'm hopeful, and I do genuinely believe that it will be available. I don't know how openly available it will be in the NHS. I'd like to see that it was openly available in the NHS. I'd like to see that, like I said in the last podcast, that there is a choice, there's an option, and it's not a case of you have to go on opiates because cannabis is bad. That's that, you know, I would like to think there was a balance there. Future, I go through phases where I have days and I think, you know, like I'll get letters or I'll have meetings. I work away in the background and I have meetings with the government or NHS, and I think I come off it and I think that's it, this is it.
Yeah.
And then I get an email 2 weeks later that almost reads like that meeting didn't take place.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I clearly was in a different meeting from you guys, because that's not what I took from that.
Yep.
And it's an absolute slap in the face. So I always say to my mum, anybody that I phone after these meetings and say, you know, my boss, I always phone my boss, and she's dead funny because she'll go, right, let's not get our hopes up, but, you know, and I'll say, I think this is it, this sounds positive, and then it's 2 weeks later, so it's another slap in the face. And it's when I get the slap in the face, because I take people at face value, and I have, most of it's been Zoom recently. So when you meet people and you tell them about your story and you tell them about Cole, and they're saying, I can't even begin to imagine, you know, I'm a parent, I can't even begin to imagine what you've went through, and that's terrible, you've had to go through that, and I'll do anything I can, and I'll try my hardest to fix this for you. And then you get an email that says, as per clinical decision, blah, 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 we can't do anything, it's a clinical decision. And it's almost like they've just copied and pasted a paragraph from a letter that you had 3 years ago. So it's, I suppose for me, actually, when I do my walking, I do a lot of walking, and when I do walking, I listen to like The Secret and stuff. And yesterday I was out walking and I was listening to the chapter on gratitude. And it was about, you know, you have to be grateful. And I am grateful. So I tried to kind of remember where we were. And although it is a struggle trying to find this kind of money, and it is exhausting, you know, I've got my boy back. And no matter what they throw at me, COVID, Brexit, lockdowns, you know, I'm always laughed at, because I always said, I don't know if you ever seen our documentary, but when I did BBC Disclosure documentary, I think I might have said I'd sell my house about 50 times.
Right.
To the extent my friend Paul used to send me screenshots of the ugliest pictures of me where I'd sell my house across the front of it. But yeah, you know, with money, there's always options, there's always ways of finding it. But with Cole's illness, you know, you've got to be grateful. I'm one of the fortunate ones. You know, Cole's an absolute superstar. I mean, that's him. He wants to be a YouTuber now. Might try and get him to be a TikToker, actually. That might be the new thing. I think YouTube's like Facebook, it's going out.
Possibly, aye.
So yeah, he's you know, he's great. We were at Airthrill yesterday, and he was buzzing about and loving life. So I'm grateful. Every day I have to remind myself how far we've came and how grateful I am to have him back to full health. And then, sorry, I thought that was him coming down. I was going to get him to come and say hello, but he's disappeared back up the stairs. Okay. Yeah, so as hard as it is, it could be a lot worse.
Yeah. I was sitting thinking just as you were speaking there about just, I don't know. I can't, do you know, for anybody listening and for yourself, Lisa, obviously, I'm not going to add anything to that, because there's nothing that you as Cole's mum, you've said it all. There's nothing I can add to that whatsoever. I just think you're amazing. I really do. I think, but yeah, do you know, I always remember you saying about taking compliments and stuff, but I know that this is about the wee guy, but I just think as his mum, just the work that you do is, yeah, you're amazing. So,
Thank you.
no, God, let's give a shout out to your social media pages and the GoFundMe. So, we'll share them as well on the podcast's Instagram and stuff. But do you know them off the top of your head, just for them that's listening or watching, they can maybe take them?
Yes. So Cole's Facebook page is Cole's Fund for Sick Kids, purely because I can't change the name, and I set it up years ago when I used to raise money for the hospitals, by the way. So it's Cole's Fund for Sick Kids, and that will give everybody Cole's journey, videos, all that kind of stuff. And then his GoFundMe page is under Cole's Life Saving Medicine. And again, the link for that is pinned at the top of his Facebook page. It's also on my Facebook page, which all Cole's posts are public anyway.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, Lisa, thank you so much. Yeah, just keep. I think you're so right about the gratitude thing, especially regarding the wee guy's health. But hope's a wonderful thing as well. Just, I think, do you know what I think? I think that when you made that decision that this was the way you were going to go, that must have been inspired by hope. It must have been like, do you know, we're going to try this, and I hope that
there's a quote that I shared in one of my videos, and I'm sure it's never give up hope because miracles happen every day. And that's definitely one of the quotes that sticks to me, because it's true. Yeah. And you've got to hope. You've got to stay positive.
And he's up the stairs on spending.
I think he's actually fighting with his brother at the moment. I could hear them shouting at each other because Cole's in one room and Dylan's in the other, and they're both on their Xbox, probably competing. And every now and then they'll run into each other's room, winding each other up. And again, as much as I draw my eyes and I'll come off this and go upstairs and give the two of them a big row because they've interrupted my podcast. Again, you know, we never had that. My boys couldn't even play with each other, so that's quite a nice thing as well. Yep. Cole actually asked me earlier if I was famous because I was listening to your previous podcast just so I knew where I was at, what point, and I had it through the Alexa while I was cooking dinner. And Cole came into the kitchen and he kind of looked about and he went, "Are you on the Alexa?" I said, "Yeah, it's through my phone." And he said, "Are you famous too?"
Brilliant. Right, Lisa, thank you so much. I'll let you get to the boys and the dogs. And
yes, back to my crazy life.
We're recording on Thursday, guys, so this will be available on Saturday morning, and I'll tag you in and do what we do.
Brilliant.
All right?
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much for having me.
No worries at all. My pleasure.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.